what were some of the core building blocks that got you from, broke and unemployed
Yeah.
to having hired, a large number of people, 30, 40 people?
Um, I, I think it's a combination of persistence. You're going to go through lots of no's and lots of people telling you that what you're saying is fundamentally flawed. Uh, and you need to be able to, that segues to the second point, which is you need to be able to put your ego aside and look at it objectively. Is what they're saying logical or not, despite me having spent a ton of time and effort and publicly stated one thing, and after speaking with a number of people and they're telling me otherwise, and I did go back to the drawing board and look at the data. I'm like, oh, actually, I was wrong. I think that's something that you really need to be able to do. Basically, be very objective, and to do that, you do need to, you need to stuff that ego real fast. The other I would say is, I know this is cliche, but your network is your net worth. I really believe this more so than ever. Like relationships.
How do you find those? Right, we all hear that all the time, and I think most of us are like, yeah, that's a nice Instagram meme. But how, if you don't feel like you have a network, what do you do to find networks? What do you do to find mentors? Like, how does someone get that in their life if they don't have it?
Ask me. Honestly, the number of mentors, official advisors to our new fund that we're raising $100 million, I found them on LinkedIn. Like, just politely asked. You'd be surprised how many people actually will give you at least 5 minutes of your time. And then it's on you to make that 5 minutes convert to a follow-up meeting and a follow-up. And then eventually, if nothing else, even just take that very, very loose tie and turn it into a slightly stronger tie, and do that over and over again.
What are some of the ways that you ask? Like, I could easily see someone be like, well, that's great. I've already done that. I've slid into 100 people's DMs and I said, hey, give me a job. What?
Yeah.
Like, there has to be a way. You didn't slide into someone's DM on LinkedIn or their in mail and say, hey, do you want to invest $100 million into my fund on this Omani kid? We're doing a really amazing stuff.
That sounds like
you need me.
A scam.
You need me. How do you, what are some of the steps that you have used to build those relationships? Because I'm sure that it's not one, in-mail box, and next thing you know, they're cutting you $100 million.
No, I think generally, if I were to distill it down to a few key elements, I would say it's one, empathy. So, try to understand what this person cares about, right? If this person is a hardcore investor, don't talk to them about, necessarily, something that's completely unrelated, right? Figure out what makes this person tick. Before I email them, I'll be very frank with you. I kind of read up their profile. I said, look online. Did they have any articles? What makes this person tick? And then find that angle that resonates, right? That angle needs to be authentic too. Don't just make up stuff just so you can pretend that you have something in common. And honestly, I just found is those two things together, both in person or in mail or sliding into someone's DMs. If you do those two things, eventually you're going to get their attention with a relatively high conversion rate. And then it's up to you to kind of take it from there. And, really, one of the best advice I heard and read even, and it's a cliche, but I think it's true. Often cliches are true. And then, your goal really in that first meet is not to do anything other than to secure a second one. Don't try to tell your whole life story in that first meet. Just get them hooked enough to say, yeah, I'll spare a little bit more time next time. And you can dive deeper because now you passed the intros. And then, kind of almost reneging what I said earlier, ideally you want warm intros. So initially it's hard if you don't have a network at all, but that's the beauty of a lot of the stuff. It's a network, and you get network effects. The more you do, the easier it gets exponentially. Because eventually, very quickly, particularly when you're delving into a certain sphere, and that sphere can be quite a broad, like talk about tech, the network, especially now in a globalized world, are quite overlapping, at least, let's say within regions. And so chances are, there's this key person you want to meet over time. This person probably at least knows one or maybe two people that you already know. And that just adds credibility, and that increases the probability that they're going to respond to you.
And in this process, you've mentioned earlier about checking your ego at the door. I mean, I'm sure there's got to be moments where you hit rejection, you hit walls, where you finally landed your mentor and you're like, finally, they're going to see how great I am, and they just tear you a new one. How do you, and you referenced this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to kind of circle back to that and end on that. If you could just unpack a little bit more some of your ethos, even in PhazeRo, of what does it mean to check your ego at the door? What does it mean to submit yourself to other people who have different ways of and more experience of processing, data or systems? And what do you do with that failure of when your ego gets bruised?
Yeah, I mean, this is a culture that I've been working hard to instill within the organization, because fundamentally, what I'm trying to do here is ensure that we're constantly growing and getting to the right answer, right? We're not trying to ensure that I'm right or that, whoever it is right. We're just trying to get to the correct objective answer. And the only way to do that is to leave this filter, this obfuscating, filter, your ego, and pack it outside. Basically, that's kind of the reason why I do it, at least. And again, I think over time, it's kind of like you build muscle memory over time. Initially, it gets difficult when, you are doing something one way, thinking that you are the greatest. And then you have, your mentor, for instance, Yannick, senior engineering manager from Facebook, tell you that, effectively you're complete moron. It's exactly how you're not supposed to do it. It stings a little bit. But again, if you're true to your mission, I think you can lick your wounds relatively quickly and kind of move on. And then over time, for lack of a better expression, you start to build calluses. And you're just like, yeah, okay, it was a stupid thing. Okay, what's the correct thing? Let's move on. Because ultimately, and this is what I say in the company, it's not about me. It's not about you. Everything we do is about growing this vision and turning it into a reality. And maximizing impact. So literally down to how we write notes and write it in the third person. Whenever there's, over communicate, think about building systems, because, tomorrow you're going to move on as, employee X. We want very easily to bring in employee Y so that we can continuously grow this business, right? Because ultimately it's not about me. It's not about you. So even myself, I want to grow it in a way that, if I had to leave, the systems itself are so robust and in place that I can, essentially replace myself with relative ease. And this company will not just sustain, but continue to grow. So that's, to me, why I think checking your ego is super duper important, because it's probably one of the most selfless. It's the fundamental building block of selflessness. I don't know. That's
I love it. I think, one thing that you said is, we have to put aside our ego, put aside our pride, our desire to be right, and open up to the high probability that we are wrong in a lot of things in life. I've recently heard, talking about marriage, if I thought that I was right 100% of the time, in even 99% of the time in my marriage, what would that say about my ability to choose a mate? Wait, you're saying that I decided to choose someone that I thought was fundamentally wrong 100% of the time. Yeah. Wow. Way to go, Lucas. You dumb. You stupid. Right? So it's opening ourselves up to the fact that wait, okay, I'm probably wrong a lot. Probably more than 50% of the time when you have more than one other person in the room. Even when you're by yourself, you're wrong a lot. And so I think realizing that, okay, we want to get down to the truth, that the right answer that exists outside of my POV, outside of my opinion, outside of my feelings, right? So, ego, what you're talking about is just wrapped up in feelings. It's wrapped up in our entitlements. Yes. It's wrapped up in, our offense. Like, oh, I'm just so offended.
Yes, absolutely. Even insecurities to a certain degree.
100%.
It's a painful exercise, but it's necessary for personal growth, and it's necessary for whatever your project's growth is. And vice versa. Like, it will be a big part of the downfall if you don't get this in check relatively early.